What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always by my main man, Steven Thompson. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. Today, we are leaving the preseason with the Pittsburgh Steelers, headed into week one, preparing for the San Francisco 49ers. But I got to say, the Steelers, they look good. They finish a perfect preseason with a 24-0 win over the Atlanta Falcons. And no matter how hard Atlanta tried to keep the clock going at the end of the game to put some points on the board, it couldn't be done. Every facet of that game looked like complete dominance for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll dive into all that, plus some names that possibly made a case for the 53-man roster in their final exam, as Mike Tomlin calls it, before roster cuts on Tuesday. It is a beautiful day in the Berg, as it should be on a Victory Friday. How you feeling, my friend?
Feeling good. Like you said before we got on, it really does feel like football season now. That you working a little later into the night, and then that alarm goes off real early in the morning, and the coffee's got to start flowing. But yeah, I mean, it always feels better after a win, and after watching what the Steelers did this preseason. I was excited to watch them last night, and regardless of the competition, like they did exactly what you would expect a team of a team like the Steelers, given what we expect of them to do against a bunch of Atlanta Falcons backups.
Yeah, I agree. And it does feel really good to wake up with a win. I mean, there were plenty of times last season where you went into a locker room that was miserable after a football game, and then you woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning and you just wrote about how bad the Pittsburgh Steelers were. And those were depressing times. You know what I mean? There's nothing worse than starting your day off by saying, hey, Kenny Pickett, not that good at football yet, at 6 a.m. That's not ideal. This year around, it seems very different. We'll dive into a lot of that, but you're right. The Atlanta Falcons, they started a lot of their starters, but also benched a lot of their starters. The Steelers still rolled out almost everybody that's healthy. Cam Hayward didn't play, and James Daniels didn't play. Both are dealing with day-to-day injuries, according to Mike Tomlin. Hopefully that's nothing serious. But the starters as a whole looked completely dominant 3 games in a row. The big question, I think, that people are going to use as a counter argument that I think we should get out of the way early. Do you look at that and say, oh, well, it was their backups? Or can you accumulate 3 really good games of football for the Steelers starters and take it away as a really good positive?
Well, I think there are a few things. First of all, they did the same thing to the Buffalo Bills as once, when they played them in extra stadiums. So I don't know if you're worried that they didn't get enough, or if they didn't look good enough against high enough level competition. I mean, just look at that Bills game. Like, they are certainly capable of this. I think the other thing is you got to play who's in front of you, and they dominated backups. Like, it's not even like, oh, they got a touchdown or 2, they were struggling against these guys. No, they completely ripped them apart in Tampa Bay and in Atlanta. I mean, they did exactly what you would expect ones to do against backups, especially, considering how good we think that the Steelers could be this year. That's what they're supposed to do. They looked exactly as good as they were supposed to, and they made it look as easy as, because it was all phases. It wasn't just hitting a couple deep shots to George Pickens and then letting Najee Harris run in from the 1. It was offense, it was passing game, it was running game, it was special teams, it was defense dominating both sides of the line. Like, it was a very complete game, and I think that was true about the Tampa Bay game as well.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think that there's not, just like you said, you play who's in front of you. There's nothing you could do about that. I don't think if you asked Mike Tomlin or Kenny Pickett or anybody, hey, look at, do you discredit anything because you played backups? They'd say, no, if we stunk, we would take that in the same light that we take dominance. And just like you said, it was all 3. Like, there wasn't a single play. I think that's the biggest thing, is it wasn't just like, oh, well, they looked really, really good as a chunk. No, there wasn't one play throughout this throughout this preseason that you could look at and say, oh, that was a bad play for the Steelers starters. Like, there is not one. And I think that is where you look at it and say, okay, like, they went through all 3 levels, like a really bad Atlanta Falcons team, possibly the worst team in the league in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then a Buffalo Bills team that people are still going to walk into the season and say, oh, can the Pittsburgh Steelers handle the Bills starters? Well, they played the Bills starters and again accumulated a perfect game. So I don't think you can discredit it. I think in limited action, this team looked ridiculous. What was the final count? It was
24 now. Or you mean like total? Like
yeah, I want to say it was 5 drives. I saw the stats somewhere. 5 drives, ridiculous numbers.
Yeah, 5 drives, 5 touchdowns. I think total
300 and some yards. Jerry Dulac, 315 yards, 5 touchdowns, 5 series. That's the total for the Pittsburgh Steelers starters in the preseason. And then on top of that, like backups looked really good. Nick Herbig looked really, really impressive during this preseason. Marcus Golden looked good. That's a name we're going to talk about. Anthony McFarland has completely, in my opinion, there is no questions. He is on the roster. I think people are going to try to make ways to say, oh, well, maybe you don't need 3 running backs. No, he's a guy that you don't want to lose. So you keep him around. There is a deep, deep defense here. I mean, at all phases, Keanu Benton in limited time, Benton has looked very good.
He has a tackle for loss, I think, in every game that he's played in. He's been really, really good. And I think that's one of the big things, after such a slow start for him. Like we were looking for him. We were searching him out during training camp practices. And then once the lights came on, he was unstoppable.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we kept saying, during training camp. I mean, you continuously, oh, well, they're just not giving him the opportunities to showcase himself. Oh, well, as soon as those opportunities presented itself, just like you said, lights came on. It was like, okay, here, this is why you took me in the second round. No questions asked. Easy. Let's dive into pretty much a piece by piece takeaway from the preseason. And it all starts with Kenny Pickett. Obviously, the guy looked every bit of impressive. He finished his preseason 13 of 15 for 199 yards and 2 touchdowns, a 158.33 passer rating. I mean, impressive is definitely a word, but I think the biggest thing that stood out to me is that he just looked so smooth back there. Like there was no rust, there was no adjustment period, there was no hiccup. It was just Kenny Pickett, man. Winnable quarterback. Really, really visible. What'd you think?
Yeah, he was just dealing. And I think he looked completely different from how he looked last year. Even when you watch Kenny Pickett and thought that he made an impressive throw last year, it was it was like a 15-yard out or, 20 yards over the middle. Each of his most impressive throws this preseason was, that deep ball along the sideline to Deontay last night.
Yes.
Perfectly placed. 30 yards downfield. The back shoulder throw to Pat Freiermuth in the Bills game. That was 25 yards downfield for a touchdown. Beautiful. And then of course George Pickens did a lot of work on that catch down the sideline last night as well. But that's also a really well placed ball by Kenny. And it's the accuracy. It's the accuracy downfield. It's leading teams to scoring drive. It's getting everyone involved. I didn't do the math on how many targets he hit, but he throws to, he's not just feeding, Deontay and George Pickens. He's not forcing throws into there. He is finding everyone and getting everyone involved, which I think is a big piece of it too.
Yeah, I agree. And even just like you said, like even the throw to George Pickens, like I think that's what stood out to me the most is that he understands these guys so well. Like the throw to Deontay Johnson, what stood out to me the most, great ball, obviously, but how quickly he was able to recognize Deontay is going to be open on the sideline. Okay, Deontay, because that wasn't there was no wait. It was a whatever drop back. If it say it was a 5-step drop back, boom. As soon as he got there, he unleashed it to Deontay, which means he knew before he snapped that football that Deontay was going to be open in that exact area. The George Pickens throw, I get that it's maybe a little cliche to say if you throw it up to George Pickens, he's going to catch it. But if you have one-on-one coverage, I mean, Frisman Jackson says it himself, that's a 99.9% chance George Pickens coming down with that football. Kenny knows that. All he's got to do is throw a ball that George can catch, and George is going to catch it. The Pat Freiermuth throw against the Bills was
that was probably his best one of the preseason.
I was going to say, I think that's his most impressive throw. That's double coverage, back shoulder, throws him open. Like that is a varsity level throw. That's an NFL level throw. I thought he looked good. And his ability to avoid pressure, I thought, was on display during this preseason. Just a much more mature Kenny Pickett. Everything that last year there was a lot of rattle, and when he got to a point where things calmed down, mostly in those clutch moments, like in those 2-minute drives, you could see like he was just like, okay, well, I don't have a choice but to just be a winner right now. But before that, it was a lot of like, oh my gosh, everything is moving so fast. I don't know what's going on. This year, it's you could tell everything is so slow to him. You know what I mean? He can move, he could stay in the pocket, he doesn't have to run. It's just it was overall very, very impressive. And the growth of Deontay Johnson, definitely noticeable. George Pickens, I mean, we're gonna go all season long, like talking about trying to downplay the level of George Pickens, being like, well, he's still got to do this, he's still got to do. But I mean, I don't know. It's hard to be more impressive than George Pickens right now.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking. So it's not like a super high volume of receptions, but it's the impact of those receptions. Like they are all massive every time he touches the ball. So when you think about like statistically, is he going to put up a season that's on par with like Justin Jefferson or something like that?
Yeah.
No, probably not. Like we had that debate. What was that, last week or something like that?
Yeah.
But he is going to be as impactful as any wide receiver in his division, in the AFC, in this league. Like I truly believe that. We've been saying that he has superstar potential. And I think we might have been underrating him a little bit. Like I don't think he's going to be as how do I phrase this? He's going to be much better, I think, than his statistics would indicate. Like he is going to be much more impactful than, he might just have, 800 yards and 10 touchdowns, but it's going to be super crucial, and each of his catches is going to be really important, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what also, I don't know, hurts but helps at the same time is that a lot of these guys like Justin Jefferson doesn't really have a 2. KJ Hamler, or not KJ Hamler,
Jordan Addison.
Now it's Jordan Addison, but there was a guy last year.
KJ Osborne.
That's the guy, KJ Osborne.
Yeah.
His name was mentioned a million times in that quarterback series. I was like, I didn't even know this guy existed. But Justin Jefferson never really had like a number 2. Adam Thielen, but even as Justin Jefferson emerged, Adam Thielen kind of dipped. All those guys. George Pickens, he's like on the verge of transitioning into a number 1, but he still has a number 1 in Deontay Johnson on top of a really strong number 3 in Allen Robinson and a ridiculous tight end in Pat Freiermuth. So to say that, it's just like you said, like his volume's not going to be there, but his impact might be just as high, just because just like you said, like by the end of the season, you could probably create a highlight reel of just like ridiculous catches that George Pickens has put on display in 2023 alone. It's going to be scary times. To stick with the offense, I think the last big thing we got to talk about, and this kind of blends into 2, is Najee Harris, who finally got a bulk of the runs last night, finished the game with 4 rushes, 18 yards, and a touchdown, averaged 4.5 yards a carry, which is exactly what Pittsburgh Steelers fans have been waiting for. Jaylen Warren looked just as impressive, being his 1-2 punch. And then that offensive line was, a thing of beauty last night. It was ridiculous. But to stick on Najee, because I think that's, what everybody's been waiting for. Finally get a taste. Did it lessen your worries about heading into week 1 a little bit?
Well, I don't know if I was ever worried per se. So I guess you were a little worried about Najee, just like, does he still have it? Like, I guess I had faith that he was going to be able to show up by week 1. But yeah, you didn't know for sure. It was a different kind of, it was a different kind of feeling going into this year as opposed to last year.
Yes.
And also, you kind of confident, like started real confident, in, at the beginning of the preseason, then it kind of dipped a little bit as you kind of didn't see him work as much. And then last night I kind of came back around. He showed some explosiveness. He ran, for his long run was 12 yards. I thought that was an impressive run. Showed some power as well, getting into the end zone. It was everything that you would want to see from Najee Harris, everything you expected. You'll take 4.5 yards from carry, 4.5 yards a carry from Najee Harris every single week. That's excellent. Like and also, I mean, like the carry split, like 4 carries to Jalen's 2, if that's how the ratio works out for the rest of the year, I feel like that's ideal for everyone. Like
Yes.
that's enough to get Jalen in as a change of pace, but also Najee to kind of wear teams down and make sure that he gets what he needs he gets hot like he needs to in order to be really impactful.
Yes, exactly. And the 1-2 punch was still evident. Like Jalen ran it twice, but he averaged 7 yards a carry. They both scored a touchdown. Najee averaged 4.5 yards a carry. Like that's exactly what you want is, okay, Jalen come on the field, burst a 12-yard run. Awesome. Because like to expect 60-yard runs all the time is not a real thing. Yeah. So if you could burst a 10-yard run, you're like, oh, that's the change of pace back we're looking for, while Najee just ground and pounds it. It was exactly what the Steelers have been waiting for. The fact that they were able to use Jaylen Warren, like, I don't want to say on the goal line, but within the 5-yard line to score a touchdown also, I think is a huge boost, because that's where a lot of people would say, oh, well, you have to put Najee on the field. No, like Jalen could be a little muscle hamster and he could force his way into an end zone. And you saw that last night. And the ability to split those things, keep defenses on their toes, huge. Along that, the offensive line last night was wild, dude. That 12-yard burst by Najee was a thing of beauty. The trio of Dan Moore, Isaac Seumalo, and Darnell Washington, like, actually gave me chills for a second. When they replayed that run, I was like, oh my gosh, you couldn't do that. Like, that's 2 games in a row where you could not draw up a better run blocking scenario on a whiteboard than what they did last night.
Yeah. And, I'm starting to think that, like, so the biggest difference between this team and last year's team is obviously going to be Kenny taking a leap and George taking a leap. But Isaac Seumalo is by far the most impactful addition to this team from the offseason. He has been phenomenal. Like every time he's played, every time he's stepped onto the field, I feel like you didn't see it all the time in practice. You just weren't able to tell. But in game action, he has looked every bit as good as the Steelers expected him to be. He was phenomenal. I also thought, like, Kendrick Green started in this game, and you weren't noticing him every single play. Nope. He was not bad. It was not bad.
No, the Jaylen Warren touchdown was all Zach Gentry had a good block on that too. Or no, that was the Connor Hayward one that Zach had a good block on. But the Jaylen Warren touchdown was Kendrick Green. Like Kendrick Green held his own, got his guy out of the way, created a hole. I mean, we're gonna dive into all those things, but Kendrick Green definitely looked good. But the Isaac Seumalo edition is, just like, and you like it's cool because I kind of like get to explain it because you weren't paying as much attention to the Pittsburgh Steelers before all of this started. So like you got the back end of how bad their offensive line was, but it was years. Like it was like 3-4 years of just like not bad. Like last year was such an upgrade between the years or before the years prior. Like the 2 years prior to that, you like, let me put it into context here. 2 years ago, the Steelers starting offensive line was 4th round rookie Dan Moore. Okay. Next to Kevin Dotson, who is now a 3rd string left guard for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kendrick Green, who might not make this 53-man roster, who is at center, who has been, at center. That's all I have to say. Next to 85-year-old Trey Turner, who, most people are like, who's Trey Turner? Exactly. Next to Chuks Okorafor, who spent all summer at left tackle, all summer long at left tackle. And then like 4 days before the season started, moved to right tackle, which, you talked to Spencer Anderson, you talked to Dan Moore about changing sides. All of them have a pretty simple way to put it. It's like wiping your ass with the other hand. It is it's uncomfortable to make that change 2 days before. Like that was their starting offensive line 2 years ago. The improvements there are just like it's a total game changer. Like if they have an offensive line, it allows Kenny Pickett to have time. It opens holes. This is going to be Najee Harris's best offensive line that he's seen by a mile. And James Daniels didn't even play last night. And you got to expect that, like, that's only going to get better. Like Isaac Seumalo is, I mean, the most important addition to the Pittsburgh Steelers this season. Hands, like, there's not even an argument. Yeah. It is him, and it will remain him for certain. Let's transition to the defense here. TJ Watt, absolute animal. Loved in his interview with Missy Matthews on the sideline that he said that he's saving his celebration for the regular season. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. That's how you know TJ's
living in his fears. I don't know. That's
I like that. Maybe being a little cocky. Marcus Golden and Nick Herbig continue to dominate. And I think at this point, like, I don't know how you find reps for both of them when you have TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith starting, but I mean, that is as good as a problem as it comes for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then, just like you said, Keanu Benton looks good. Armon Watts had a good game last night. DeMarvin Leal looked good as a starter. Isaiah Loudermilk continues to impress. Like that front five is just it's just so good right now for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, and you're almost a little like it's a good problem to have, but you're like, damn, how do we keep all these guys? Like you would probably want to keep. I don't even know, like 9 of these guys. Like there's at least 8 or something that are worthy of a roster spot. Like they're good enough to play on this team, but you just don't have the room for them, which is a little disappointing, but also like that's awesome. That's really, really good for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah, I mean the fact that like, Braden Fehoko, who I thought had a great preseason, kind of went under the radar. Like I think that just speaks to how good the rest of them were. Yeah, it was a really good showing on top of, a really good preseason. Like this wasn't the first time that we've seen them. And like, I'll keep going back to the Bills game. Like we saw them chasing around Josh Allen and Matt Barkley for 4 quarters, at Acrisure Stadium. Like it's been consistent throughout the entire preseason. I remember thinking during some practices, like, wow, these offensive lines keep getting blown up. Like that's not good. Like that's, this is concerning. No, the defensive line just might be that good. We might have to judge everything the offense does that we see in practice on a curve when you're going against a defense like this.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And then you have the inside linebackers, which, I mean,
Landon Roberts was
a hammer. I've come up with a new nickname for him and Quan Alexander. And Cole Holcomb impressed too. I want to talk about him, but Quan Alexander, I'm labeling the missile, and Landon Roberts is the hammer, because Landon Roberts was, I mean, and then like the best part was this dude was playing against third strings, smoking people, taking years off lives, and then getting up and talking smack afterwards. Like, go ahead, buddy. We're up 24-0 in the preseason. I'm loving.
He doesn't discriminate. He doesn't discriminate.
No, he does not. Quan Alexander is a man on a mission out there. He looks so fast. And then, we wanted Quan Alexander to be that coverage guy, but Cole Holcomb looked very impressive in coverage last night. And I think that is an element that if he could be that guy and be that all-around inside linebacker that the Steelers hoped he was going to be, while you have a thumper in a Landon Roberts, just a heat-seeking missile in Quan Alexander, and then a little hammer in Mark Robinson coming off the bench. Like that group is night and day. It is wild, the change that has made once they've overhauled the 4 or 5 guys in there.
Right, and even I think about the beginning of camp when we were watching Cole Holcomb take his first snaps in coverage, and I was like, this is bad. This is this is a problem. But he has made so many strides from where he was right at the beginning of camp. Those first few practices we saw, he's been really good, even better than advertised, I would say. I'd say for as much as this group has been an upgrade, it was okay, they're better than last year, but they started in such a low place that, basically anything would have been an upgrade. No, this is a legitimate upgrade. This is no longer, it's the weakest part of the defense, probably, maybe not
just because of how stacked the defense is.
Right. But that says more about the rest of the defense than anything else.
Yeah. I agree. And then there's obviously the secondary, but we'll dive into all that with names that may or may not make this roster. Special teams, real quick. Over under 2 punt return touchdowns by Calvin Austin this year. What are you taking?
Over.
Smoking
Like
the
that's
over.
well, because he also he's got his speed, but he had great blocking too. Like they were they were complete team reps. But yeah, Calvin's electric. In the which I'm happy about because I'm an Allen Robinson guy. Like I think Allen's going to be a really big part of the offense. So I just I'm concerned isn't the right word, but just interested to see how much they're actually able to get Calvin in with that first team and how much he does actually contribute on offense. But he's going to touch the ball a lot on special teams, and he's going to have plenty of chances to make his name there and make an impact there. So it's good to see him make the most of those opportunities because it's like, yeah, there was that big one he had against the Bills, but it's like 20 yards every time he touches the ball, every time he gets a return.
Yeah, dude, that second, like the redo on the last punt that he took, I believe. I mean, he was completely surrounded, somehow still got 12 yards. And I was like, oh, okay, that's just, and the craziest part is like, we were talking to him in the off season and he'd say things like, oh, I'm still like speed wise, I'm not like all the way there. If he's still not all the way, I don't understand how you could be faster. Like, I just I don't know how someone could be faster than Calvin Austin is right now. Electric, just like electric.
Did you
the perfect word to see it?
Did you see the I forget how early in the game it was, but Mike Tomlin comes up to him after one of his returns and he's absolutely giddy. They showed it like on the broadcast, like he was literally like he was giggling so much just talking to Calvin and congratulating him after a punt return. It was my favorite moment of the night. I'll have to find the GIF again. Someone had like a screen grab. I think the Steelers might have actually posted.
They might have put it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, like that's just when you're winning, you're having fun, you know? And this preseason was so much fun. And Calvin Austin is just a fun dude. You know what I mean? Right. Like he's just like it's a guy like that who's just a genuine good dude and a hard worker and coming back from something like that to make an impact. Yeah, like I would be the same way. I'd be the same way. All right, last thing I want to talk about here. We have talked all year long, and we're going to dive into it very heavy on Monday. Obviously, the day before the 53-man roster is officially announced. But last night was a really good look at who the Pittsburgh Steelers have, who they might choose to remove themselves from heading into the season. There's a couple of names here. We got to start with the big one, Kendrick Green, who by all accounts was gone. And the Steelers gave him opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to make this roster. And they finally said, screw it. We are out of guards. Go play guard. See how you do. And I got to say, just like you said, he looked good. And I don't, maybe good is a strong word. He didn't look bad. There were no points where there was noticeable that Kendrick Green was even on the field, unless he was creating a hole for a guy like Jaylen Warren. Do you think he earned a roster spot last night?
I don't even know if I want to say yes, but I think I'm tempted to say yes, but I still don't think so. One good game doesn't erase, a whole body of work. I think you got to look at it all in its kind of totality, and the totality is not very good.
Totality is bad.
Yeah, so I think it's honestly a little bit concerning because does this make him more likely to get picked up? Like if you wanted to keep him on the practice squad, does this make that less likely? I think it does. So I still think he ends.
Do you think it creates a trade scenario for him? You think it maybe put him on the map for a little trade?
Maybe. I mean, you're still not getting anything above what, like if you get a 5th rounder, you're over the moon. Right?
That's a good pick. That's a good pick. You can do a lot with a 5th round pick over losing a guy that you just tossed onto waivers,
I was gonna say, well, if Isaiah Simmons is going for a 7th rounder, I don't know what.
Yeah, I don't, but that one doesn't count. Like that one, the Arizona Cardinals were just like, all right, we're just going to get rid of everybody we could possibly get rid of right now, and we'll just start over next season. That one, I don't know. I don't know. I agree with you. I don't know if you're getting a 5th. I think that might be the best. But even if you could get, if you could get anything for the guy, to ship him somewhere in the NFC, why not? Why not just sounds good? Because I agree with you. I don't think that I don't know. I don't think that
Yeah.
I think a one good night, cool. I think Kevin Dotson's injury plays a huge role into all this,
Yeah.
but I don't know how significant that injury is. He's been hurting all summer. That's the thing that stands out to me is like, and Kevin Dotson's dealt with injuries in the past that have shut him down for a year. So like, if Kevin Dotson's going to miss a huge chunk of time, maybe he's do you think there's any possibility that they cut Dotson to keep Kendrick just because of health concerns?
Oh no, I don't think so. I
Okay.
mean, look, if they were off of Dotson, I feel like they would have gotten like these injury concerns aren't new, like you said. I don't know if that was a reason why you would. I mean, that would be the reason why you're getting off Dotson, right? Like you're
Yeah.
not. Yeah. So I mean, you would have done that already. I feel like, especially after adding Herbig. I think that's the other thing. Like, do we know how?
Uh,
Because Herbig didn't play last night either, right?
no, he talked to Alan Saunders, I believe, last week and said that he feels good, was hoping to play, but there was a really small chance that he does. I think by week 1, like it's optimistic that he's back or like right
Mhm.
on the verge of being back. I've heard multiple weeks, but I heard that like 2 weeks ago. So,
Mhm. That's
we'll
multiple weeks. That's
that's what I'm saying. Like we're pretty close to the multiple week mark
yeah.
for a shoulder injury. Guy who's been working at practice, like not in teams, but with the trainers and stuff. You could
Yeah.
see him kind of ramping up.
And we
I
still
agree
got
with you
2
though.
weeks until
Yeah, until the regular
the opening.
season. I agree though. I think that I don't know. I still think Kevin or Kendrick Green's a guy that possibly you could sneak through waivers. Feel really good about if you do. If nobody's willing to take a shot on this
Yeah.
guy, cool. If somebody is, enjoy him.
Mhm.
Enjoy him.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Mhm.
A couple other names. Zach Gentry is a name that we talked about. You weren't totally sold that he was gone. I got to say, after last night, he did have a good block with the third team. But the fact that Darnell Washington played with the first team for 2 games
Yeah.
in a row and was part of that trio that opened up a beautiful hole for Najee Harris, I just think that in that moment, you kind of just, in my eyes, I saw it as somewhat of a parting with Zach Gentry. There's just no need to keep this guy around.
Yeah, and I think I said this on the last show, but I just didn't know if there was really anything Zach Gentry could do in this game that would have
Yeah.
unless, he caught 6 touchdowns for 100 yards. Like, it would have had to been really spectacular for him to show that he is different enough as a player and good enough and that much better than Darnell Washington to earn a roster spot. So I think he came in kind of fighting a losing battle. And yeah, and then he lost. So I mean,
Yeah.
he didn't do anything that completely opened my eyes, and I wasn't watching saying, especially on that good block that you mentioned, I wasn't saying, oh wow, I didn't know Zach Gentry could block. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Exactly.
I knew that about him. So yeah, I don't think he'll make it either. He'll get picked up by someone. He's a good enough player too. But just won't be for the Steelers.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is time, and that stinks. You re-sign him, you feel good about the future, but it's one of those prime examples where free agency and the draft were switched around. He wouldn't be in Pittsburgh. He
Yeah.
would have spent the summer somewhere else because they would already had Darnell Washington, and the development of Darnell Washington should be very like it should have fans very excited and the Steelers
Mhm.
very excited about how quickly this guy can adjust to an NFL roster. And Connor Hayward, like there's always the argument of, oh, well, Connor Hayward's not really a tight end. I get that, but like last year, those were your 3 tight ends and you felt okay about it. This year, they could also be your 3 tight ends and you could feel okay about it. Like
Yeah.
there's no need to keep 4 just because you want to utilize Connor Hayward elsewhere as well. Des Fitzpatrick, guy that we think was competing. I mean, Gunnar Olszewski's up there as well, but competing with Gunnar, competing with Miles Boykin, had an impressive night. Not sure. I want to say he obviously caught that punt at like the 2-yard line, which was
Yeah.
very impressive. Didn't catch a pass.
Targeted twice. Yeah. No catches.
Targeted twice, no catches. You look at this as a guy that might have snuck his way on there. Or you think that he's still on the outside looking in? And if he is, who's on the inside looking out?
Yeah, I still think Gunner kind of has the inside track on that wide receiver race. I'm still not sold on Miles Boykin. I think Dez. Really like Dez. I think both as a receiver and obviously as a special teamer, like he showed
Yeah.
last night, that guy's NFL capable. but it's just way too crowded. And I think if you're thinking about keeping a sixth receiver, it's gonna be Boykin. It like has to be Boykin.
Yeah. Do you think they keep 5 or 6?
Not having like a 53 man in front of me, I'm gonna have to lean 5, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there's a chance that like Fitzpatrick sneaks through waivers and you can like I don't think Boykin would. But I think you keep 5 just because there are so many other places that, and especially the way the offensive line, like if you have to put someone on like short-term IR and like find room to manipulate the roster there, like you just can't. Like a 6 receiver is a luxury roster spot, and the Steelers don't have that luxury right now.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think that maybe you bring one up to put a guy like Nate Herbig or Kevin Dotson on IR, but like afterwards. But I don't think that either of them make the 53-man roster right now. I will say in my notes from last night, I do have early in the game, Gunner completely whiffed on a kick block and like completely whiffed. And Anthony McFarland got blown up at the 20 and everybody was making a big deal about it. That was 100% on Gunner. Dude didn't even.
At the start of the game?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Anthony probably shouldn't have brought that ball out anyway.
No. The one before that, he got stuffed at the. Oh, no. It was that one. It was that one. He shouldn't have brought that one, but he was probably told just like Calvin, return everything. Don't, so I would imagine that like it definitely miscommunication, but at the same time, Gunner didn't look impressive. I still think he holds the upper hand. I think that you could find other ways to fill the hole of Boykin and Dez after what I saw last night, just because special teams did look so impressive as a whole that I think right now you're just like, but maybe, if there's an extra roster spot, I think that's the guys who get it. But for right now, yeah, I agree. I think Gunner's the guy. You could bounce Allen Robinson outside if you need to. You could probably use Gunner outside if you need to, but for the most part, there's no, it's not like Miles Boykin was a guy that was like contributing offensive minutes last year. And you were just like, oh, okay, well, this guy, like you need him to catch passes when Deontay's not like, no, you don't. You don't need either of those things to happen. Last one here for you, Miles Killebrew, who don't believe took a defensive snap last night. Don't even know if he played. I didn't even see him on the field. Coming off of a tip punt the week before, he is really good at that. You think that he makes the team?
I really want to say no. Like I've not been impressed by Miles Killebrew at all. But my gut says yes. Like my gut says that they still see a ton of special teams value in him.
Yeah.
And that's just irreplaceable in their minds, especially if we're thinking about maybe getting rid of Miles Boykin. There's just I think we talked about this on the last episode too. Like you can only get rid of so many of your really good special teamers before you start to notice a problem. I think even with the way things looked last night, I'm gonna lean I don't feel great about it, but I am gonna lean towards Miles Killebrew does make the roster.
So I'm transitioning, I believe.
Wow.
To a no. I know, and I'll tell you why. I think that at this point, it is impossible to get rid of Elijah Riley and Chandon Sullivan. They both offer too much defensive value, and Elijah Riley is too good of a special teamer. And I think that allows you to feel comfortable removing Miles Killebrew. Elijah could pretty much be your fourth safety. Could be, I mean, the dude had this is 3 games in a row where Elijah Riley has stood out on special teams, had good special teams play. Chandon Sullivan is, I mean, even when he's not in coverage, the dude just bats balls at the line of scrimmage, so it's fine. You don't even have to do anything. And if Elijah Riley's rushing the edge, he's just going to get to the quarterback. So, like, who cares about a coverage nickelback? Yeah. You don't need one. You could keep both of those guys. You could feel comfortable about their contributions on defense more than you would feel about Miles Killebrew. And if they fell into a situation where they needed a safety, they're putting Elijah Riley out there before they put Miles Killebrew, in the regular season. That's just how that would work. Yeah. And I think that that's an excuse to get rid of Miles Killebrew. But I have to look at a 53-man roster. I think that if there's an extra spot there, they're going to fill it with special teams guys. I think Boykin, and I think Killebrew has the upper hand in that race, but over Boykin. But I think that those two and maybe Des Fitzpatrick would be the names that they say, oh, okay, well, we'll add you as our last guy because, we need special teams guys. But I think Elijah Riley fills that void. And because I think Chandon won that battle, but I think Elijah is good enough to overhaul Killebrew.
Yeah, man, I love that. I think that's ideal. I think that would be the best solution for everyone. I don't know the Steelers necessarily feel that way, but that makes perfect sense to me. I think, you just want to reward guys who play well. Like you don't, like during the preseason, I feel uncomfortable just saying, oh, well, we know who Miles Killebrew is. We know what he's done in the past. I mean, like you said, the difference in special teams value versus Miles Killebrew and Elijah Riley is not, I don't think, big enough to warrant like, oh, Miles Killebrew slam dunk. Like we got to keep him.
Yep. I agree. Again, 53 on Monday, we'll have a better look at the 53 and depict it or take it apart piece by piece to come up with who the Steelers will be rocking with. But for right now, you look at those 4 names and you feel maybe there's some change coming to the Pittsburgh Steelers, late additions, late removals. That final preseason game, like Mike Tomlin said, final exam. I mean, it was as good of one as you could possibly ask for the Pittsburgh Steelers. With that, we're heading out of here. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk, and find us anywhere you get your podcasts. Check out all of our work, especially this weekend as the cuts come in and the Steelers 53-man roster begins to be revealed at allsteelers.com, and all of our exciting pit stuff at InsideThePanthers.com. We will be back on Monday. Enjoy a beautiful weekend in the Berg. Peace.